After all that, this is how Lance Stroll responds? Yeah, something tells me that Aston, Papa Stroll, and Lance might have had the talk. And that Lance really doesn't care anymore, because just look at what Fernando's doing. Losing a shot at a first podium in 5 years would sting, sure, but his reaction in finishing 7th was graceless, and his later walkback felt forced. But I think it's quite safe to say that the package that came around in Imola did provide the team some crumbs for comfort, in that, unlike 2024, that Imola package provided them absolute despair. So when you take all of that into consideration, that this was going to be Lance's best weekend since the start of the season, you think he would have taken any points-paying position with good grace, because he started right near the back, and then he found himself in the dizzying heights of 3rd for a little bit. Sure, the car wasn't going to be converting that into an actual podium, given where it is in terms of pace and chewing up tyres, as both drivers have said, but a solid top 5-ish finish is certainly something the team would have been proud with. But yet again, all we saw from Lance Stroll was not incompetence, as many people around the internet would like to associate with the Canadian, but despair, negativity, a buzzkill. The latest source of concern? The post-race radio slide that wasn't broadcast. When his race engineer Gary Gannon, who usually can get the best and chirpiest moves out of any driver, got on the radio to say that Stroll had an amazing finish, what kind of response did he get back? Silence? A clip reply? No. Stroll called his car the worst piece of dog egg I have ever driven. Then awkwardly added, but it's okay. Not convincing. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be dedicating this entire video to saying that Lance Stroll is the worst driver of all time, blah, 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 blah. Because put simply, in the sport's 75-year history, he is not the worst driver in its entire history. No, not even close. Instead of being the worst driver in Formula 1, I would say he's the most uninspiring driver in Formula 1 history. Does that sound more accurate to you? In short, be grateful you got P7, buddy, because I'm pretty sure your side of the garage would have been jumping up for joy, and when they heard that on the radio, that would have brought the entire mood down. Because when you look to the other side of the garage, what Fernando Alonso is able to do and say, he has got the motivational aura for both of them, both he and Lance. Because trying to compare them, it's like chalk and cheese. Because sure, Fernando does have his outbursts, but they're usually tinged with the idea of looking forward, trying to improve for next time, gee up the troops, and therefore, and also given his reputation, it's more likely to get people at Aston Martin to go like, yeah, we can do this! Fernando believes in us! He's got our back! All the while, Lance is not grateful for this at all, and he's down in the dumps mode. Yeah. And that difference is easy to spot in their own words from multiple interviews. For example, when Adrian Newey was announced, Alonso called him an inspiration, praising the boss's vision, and that Aston Martin would be the team of the future. Straight from the team's playbook. Very, very nice. Exactly what the sponsors would want to hear. In contrast, at his lowest post-Canada, Stroll, rushed back from injury, flatly said, "We're slow. It's not gonna get better. Probably like this again and again." Tone is very important in every respect and circle of life. And that tone will not be tolerated when the big leagues come in to play with Aston Martin Aramco, such as indeed Aramco coming in even more, Honda coming in even more off the back of their time with Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and, well, effectively, the entire Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the attitude of Lance just simply doesn't convey or line up with the mood and vibe and general ambitions that the team wishes to exude to any brand new investor. Now, of course, I know that you're going to be saying, well, Fernando's not blameless in this regard. He's had his own fair shares of radio bust-ups in his history, and yes, you are correct. But at the same time, Fernando is quite positive and hopeful about what can be expected for the team, as is everyone else who is a high flyer there. But yes, throughout all of this, he is not blindly positive. He too was compromised around Silverstone and added to his growing collection of radio witticisms, barking the phrase, "Crazy how you never get it right with me," when the plan with the pit stops went against him, to go alongside his Imola outburst, which he exclaimed that he was the unluckiest fudging driver in the world. Alonso does get a bit of a pass regarding his radio chatter and tantrums because, well, he's got the legacy to back it up. His world championship caliber is something that will not tolerate what's been going on and how he felt hard done by. May I remind you, back in Miami, when the car was objectively worse than it is right now, he could have had a podium in the sprint, but then it was denied through the team just dropping the ball in terms of strategy. This has happened again in Silverstone when it definitely could have been a podium in the main race. But his fire is part of the package, and that fire to impress a multiple world champion is something that the team can get behind. Unfortunately, when he gets out of the car, he does tend to do a bit of a reset, he has a think, and then he sort of calms down a little bit. Whereas Stroll's comments, more often than not, just tend to circle back to the whole adage of these three words: this is hopeless. Alonso is doing his best to try and be constructive, whilst also showing his anger at times. It just makes Lance out to be a bit of a defeatist, that there's not really much he can do and he's just given up, rollen over and died. As well as criticising the car's very existence, calling it the worst he's ever driven. I mean, sorry, you calling this worse than the 2018 Williams, Lance? Really? Really? Fernando, he does criticise the car's position and where it's at, but not the car's very place in life and reality. I mean, yes, he has been quite scathing about the car earlier in the year, saying that at one point it was causing him to die out there with nothing to hope for, but that was before the upgrades took hold around Imola. And once they did take hold, Fernando has been back to scoring consistently, and could have scored in Monaco had it not been for an engine failure, and sometimes pulling off remarkable efforts along the way. May I remind you of Austria? That was incredible. Even in his sweary moments, he's still asking questions, proposing alternatives, making pushes for a different call. Now, I can understand that some of you out there who might be quite supportive of Lance Stroll will be pulling out the heat of the moment card, that what you say in that moment can easily be disseminated and distinguished by the time you come to the media pen and in the debrief. That the tone might be different. Well, about that. Stroll's interviews often repeat the negativity, although his Silverstone debrief was a little less negative than most of them, but even then, it still focuses on the car's limitations instead of its potential, in the fact that, well, he was contesting for a podium for a good long while. And Alonso, he tends to reset after the race in his comments. He praises the team's efforts, sometimes talks about the next upgrades, and even in this one, he congratulated Nico Hülkenberg for getting his first podium. All of that talk would surely keep the engineers and management engaged, even if his radio outbursts were quite tempestuous. Also, I can easily imagine that people who work under Fernando, and the team have been for at least a couple of seasons now, that they have some way to decode Fernando's radio messages, to almost just tune them out, that he's said it so often in the last 10 years that they don't have the same impact that they used to back at McLaren, that you'd be just thinking, Fernando's a little bit unhappy. Well, I'm sure he's not actually mad at us, really. He's just frustrated at his lot in the moment. They can excuse him in some capacity. In the case of Lance, you just feel like, well, no, that's just his genuine opinion, and that by the time you get to the paddock and the media pen, he has been told by PR gurus what to say, what not to say. And it's a good thing for Aston Martin that that radio message wasn't widely broadcast on the world feed, but this being the internet, it did find its way to get out. So should Lance get out the car? Has he gotten as much as he can out of his Formula One career? Or does he simply have no desire to be shown up yet again in 2026 when all the eyes of the world will be back on that team to see what they can do with all of their big partners? In my mind, Silverstone highlighted to me that Lance's seat is no longer secure. And that the old assumption that, oh, well, Papa Stroll would protect him, that he's got a complete bulletproof shield around him, the young Canadian. Well, I think that opinion is fading fast, given that there are so many more voices around Aston Martin at the moment from all different directions, that the old man's voice is becoming increasingly quieter. The British Grand Prix was a major indicator of all of this. Stroll did look promising in FP2, qualifying 7th, but fell apart in Q1 proper, lining up 17th, whilst, yet again, Alonso reached Q3. And these qualifying laps had been his weakest metric all season. And then what didn't help is that at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the home of some of their major investors, Lance Stroll became the driver who had been in Q1 the most in its entire history of the sport. But in Silverstone, he needed a miracle, a safety car, a bold tyre call to get near the front, which is exactly what he got. This was a chance to silence the naysayers, and that call in his race were looking really solid, poised to perhaps lift the devil from his back. Sure, third did become 7th, but the tone of Cowell was reflective, and said that P7 was the best the team could possibly hope for right now. Lance had bet that goal, so surely this would be a cause for celebration, or at least small ones. Yet his cool-down lap radio eruption condemned the entire car, drowning out the genuinely sharp strategy that afforded him this opportunity. And then, of course, while Stroll was fuming and having yet another tantrum, we saw Nico Hülkenberg go from 19th, behind Lance Stroll, into third. He stole the spotlight in a debatably slower car, even though the gap is becoming smaller and smaller as that Sauber upgrade package is becoming more and more effective. And it also, in a way, highlighted how rare Lance Stroll's standout performances have become. In 175 Grand Prix, roughly, Lance Stroll has arguably had as many standout performances that you could fit in one hand in 175 races. And especially given these conditions, this is where Lance usually excels. These breakout performances usually happen in damp transitional conditions, yet Lance simply had nothing to give. Debatably, he might have cooked his tyres when fighting Nico Hülkenberg to keep third, and that maybe, given what Carroll's comments were saying, that P7 could have been the best that they would have hoped for, had he just allowed Nico through and just saved his tyres a little bit, he might have been able to do one better and match his Australian Grand Prix result of P6, and therefore exceeding the expectations of his team, definitely getting some major brownie points with that organisation. But instead, we didn't get that. And then when you combine Fernando Alonso's 9th place for Aston Martin, 8 points right now, that should have been a good day in the office. Everyone should have been quite happy with themselves, considering this is one of their home races, and that Haas and Racing Bulls didn't score a thing, and it keeps them still in the hunt for P6 in the Constructors. And sure, it's one down from where they have been in 23 and 24. P6 would still be pretty good. It would still mark them as a solid midfielder, considering they dropped everything for next year. And Alonso could have easily had P8, since he was only a second or so behind Albon and 5 seconds behind Stroll. So yeah, that gritty fight back probably would have rubbed salt into the Canadians' wound even more. And here's the point. Stroll's defeatist attitude is not just unhelpful, it's now not in step with where Aston Martin wants to go, what it's trying to build. The focus for them is on optimization and optimism, not doom-mongering. Another poor qualifying session, going against the team, railing against the team, whilst other competitors are outshining him. Pierre Gasly overtaking him on the last lap in an Alpine, which is definitely, supposedly, on paper, slower than the Aston Martin. It just makes Silverstone out to be not just another blip for Lance, it just makes it an inflection point. That maybe it could nudge Aston Martin into having more conversations about what life will be like after Lance. That, again, it's not about Lance being a bad driver, it's just that simply he's done. Mentally, competitively, and emotionally. It doesn't help that the qualifying head-to-head this year is now 13-1 in Alonso's favour, including sprints, and that the average gap is roughly around 0.3 of a second or so. That is a departure from last year, where Lance looked likely to maybe have improved, loudly proclaiming that he had been bettering Fernando in qualifying when the stat was tied at 4-4. And I've already mentioned Nico's battling to third and Lance's desperation to hold on to that same third. Again, that would have chewed his tyres up, and therefore it completely robbed him of any pace that was limiting. And considering that Stroll already knew that tyre degradation was an issue, surely that should mean that with his vast experience in comparison to some other drivers, he would have then learnt to pick his battles and then just go, yeah, I ain't getting that. As a result, his recovery got completely overshadowed by Pierre, and Nico especially. And this brings me to another topic which might not have to do much in terms of actual racing, but something that is very important in allowing teams to go racing. Optics. Because Aston Martin is really pushing hard in making the most of its forward momentum, its brand new facilities, loads of sponsors, brand new high-talented people coming in. They want to attract also some big-name investors, more investors, and sponsors. Companies that expect excellence, polish, performance, professionalism. Are you starting to see where I'm going here, folks? This isn't the days of Racing Point or early Aston Martin where the team were muddling through with underfunded equipment and whatnot, just trying to survive, punching above their weight. The team has most likely the most advanced gubbins that money can buy, and that same money has gone to getting the best minds that money can buy, including Adrian Newey and Andy Cowell. As a result, I think the political shield that has been defending Lance arguably for the last 3 or 4 years or so is starting to weaken, diminish, get smaller, what have you. Because title winners like Newey and Cowell, they want to work with the very best. They don't want to be babysitting underperformers for the rest of their careers, even if their paychecks are quite sizable. But if that does transpire to be their main job in babysitting underperformers, they could easily walk to try and find something more stimulating for them. And given the free rein that Papa Stroll has given them in an "I don't care how you do it, I just want you to do it" mentality, I think that will actually come back to bite the Canadian billionaire in the bum, in that he's giving up all of this authority and control, giving up influence for the sake of these very talented men and women that are coming into this team with the hopes of glory and working with such a storied name and a storied world champion. Because these people will demand drivers who match their ambition. A players will want to work with A players. I mean, Adrian Newey's already been quick to enact his orders and changes since starting work 3 months ago, which has left the team even more inspired. There's stuff happening. And you could argue that his simple lunchtime conversations, as per his first interview with the team, with this year's development crew, helped ensure the Imola package provided some success to which Fernando has led the charge, saving them weeks of development and headaches, whilst Lance has shrugged his shoulders and gone, I don't know. In fact, what doesn't help Lance's cause and makes me think that he's no longer wanting to be in Formula One is in that same "it's not gonna get better" interview, he was then saying, maybe Fernando's found something while I haven't found something, so he's already giving brownie points to his teammates, someone that not that long ago he was wanting to take down a peg or two, saying that he personally was making progress. So what does that tell you? What kind of feedback or chest thumping is that? Yeah, okay, Lance, if you don't feel anything in the car, don't telegraph it, just remain silent or give some standard bump answer, and then be honest behind the scenes and maybe there might be a solution. And to me, that's just the body language and the words of a man who's just checked out. Because the team won't accept this attitude from him in next year when they want to go for a title bid. That's Honda's main ambition. They want to go for a title. And it doesn't help that Lance has also waded in on the 2026 rule set. Asked about the team's simulator model, he called the new rules a science project and a bit sad, saying that modern F1s should simplify the whole thing a little bit. That criticism is fresh, it came out not that long ago, but also right when the team is trying to sell staff and sponsors on its Honda partnership. In contrast, Fernando is more optimistic. Again. Sure, he has his own misgivings in relation to bringing the weight down and how complicated the hybrid system could be, yet he still views next year as the best shot he has in going for another title. So he is pushing the team toward that rather than just dismissing the project. That's the kind of stuff that any team would want both of their drivers to telegraph to the world. That Aston Martin, yeah, they are coming up with their own setbacks with the rule set, every single team is, but they've got this under control, they believe they can surpass it, rise above it, and come up with something fairly competitive, and make things very interesting for next year when there's a lot of uncertainty. Brilliant. Fernando is keeping to the script, whereas Lance has just chucked out the script and go, oh, what's the point? It's useless. Dad, I want out. I don't think he can stand to be humbled for another season, because that's been the case for every single year he has been partnered with a world champion. That's just not going to make you want to help out that particular driver and instead put all of your eggs in the Alonso basket to make sure that he can at least go for win number 33, or better yet, his third world title, the thing that's been dogging him for so long, the thing that he's not been able to have, and they could easily be the people to give him that. Having said that, if Stroll does want to remain in Formula One, that he just needs to stick to the script or just remain silent altogether. And the expectations coming very soon in the next 6 months, they are about to eclipse any expectations his own father had for his prospective championship bid set out for him back when he was only a wee lad. Sure, his dad is a billionaire, and they've done very well to get where they are today, and they've managed to rekindle the efforts of Team Jordan, Team Silverstone, into something that is an absolute powerhouse. That is something to give them credit for. They built a very successful and very impressive-looking Formula One team in terms of the stuff going around racing. But may I remind you, the people that he's working with now are multi-billionaires, or even trillionaires, or an entire kingdom. Yeah, a kingdom. Yeah, that is bigger than the kingdom that Papa Stroll has built for himself. And Adrian Newey is busy building his own kingdom. He's been given free rein to hire and fire who he wants. He's pushed people out. He's brought people in. He is hiring more people that get him, that will be able to enact what he's designed on paper, to have people that can then interpret the driver's feedback. But if he's getting nothing in terms of feedback from Lance, then it's one arm tied behind his back. And to top it all off, Adrian likes some experimenting, and as he's been seeing with the 2026 rule set, he's found some opportunities to find some loopholes and maybe claw back some tenths of a second or so. This is indeed a bit of a science project. So those science project quips and saying it's a bit sad from Lance, that just comes off as a bit insulting, derogatory. It's not really praising or complimenting the work that all of these talented people are putting into the wind tunnel that he isn't having to do. And also, the engagement that Lance is lacking, senior staff will notice, whereas junior staff will probably just tolerate it because they don't want to get fired by the boss. If one of the drivers is public dismissing their work and the project, those recruits could have options elsewhere, and teams will be more than happy to take them, and that will not go down well with investors. They had the best, and then the best forsook them. Cowell also keeps repeating that the squad's transformation requires absolutely every area of our team to be setting personal bests, and that new parts will be validated only when the drivers give reliable simulator and track feedback. A driver who finishes a run by calling the car hopeless gives the aerodynamicists no reference point and wastes limited wind tunnel tokens. And then from a commercial point of view, the tolerance is narrowing because Aston Martin want to become a juggernaut in terms of public relations and working with sponsors. Arm, one of their newest sponsors, for example, pushed the deal on the basis of shared values and chose Jessica Hawkins, one of their development drivers, Aston's, not Lance or Fernando, as its human face. Sponsors that tie their campaigns to equity and STEM outreach, they don't want headlines about a teammate publicly trashing the brand's flagship technology. Not to mention for that Papa Stroll is continuously seeking more investors, selling more shares of the Aston Martin Formula One team, so that means there's a greater and more diverse investor pool, which at the same time, if he sells more of his own shares, can help prop up the Aston Martin car company, which right now is in the doldrums. But let's note here, the two are very separate entities, but I'm pretty sure that Papa Stroll would want the car company to be good because that's the calling card, like how the Ferrari car company is the F1 team's calling card and how that's the PR department for the car company. Papa Stroll wants the same arrangement, and right now it's not delivering. But yes, any due diligence any brand new investor will want to make sure that every single part of the operation is running like clockwork and to the best of its ability. How much are they willing to put up with if Lance Stroll is simply not pulling his weight, even though he set up his own TikTok account? That anyone can set up a TikTok account. Well, not much longer in the US, according to news. Even though Honda has said that they will remain somewhat away from the question of team lineups, they have also said they would like to have a voice eventually after having their success with Max and Red Bull. So there's that particular leverage, there's the value of the sponsors, there's pressure from investors. There are so many factors going against Lance that it has gone beyond just yet another stinky radio message. Stroll is becoming a liability on all fronts, not just centered around the driver chestnut. That's been done. We're talking about all of the other stuff that goes into being an F1 driver. And I think more and more people will be willing to say that. Put simply, somebody needs to take Lance around the back, shake him around a little bit, be careful of the wrist, and just say to him, look, stick to the script and you'll be fine. You'll have a very good car next year. Just wait that little bit longer and then all will be fine. But it doesn't seem that Lance is willing to subscribe to that. But maybe you could be willing to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more editorials like this, as well as predictions and what have you. But yes, just Lance doesn't look like the guy who's trying to save his future in Formula One. Quite frankly, he's looking just to try and get out of it, and he's just phoning it in. He's bringing the side down. And if you work for Aston Martin, I can imagine that when you hear comments from Lance like that, given that he managed to get you 6 points, and he's still very sore about it, that wouldn't have gone down well, right? And when you consider that potentially there's rumours going around that it'll take $100 million for Max to buy himself out of his Red Bull contract, I can't imagine that Lance Stroll will be that expensive to buy out of his own contract since, well, we've not seen the contract, it's just ongoing. And you know the old adage that contracts are only worth the paper that it's printed on? I can easily imagine that someone, an investor, will easily just compensate Papa Stroll and buy Lance out of his contract just to get him out of there. Because for any Saudi investor, $2, $3, $5 million, they earn that for breakfast. So I personally think, alongside Fernando, if Aston Martin wants to have a guy who's not only fast, but also good with PR and understands how important sponsors are, then look no further than George Russell. Yes, he would be quite pricey, since rumours are saying that he's demanding $35 million a year from Mercedes, in the whole contract negotiations, but again, $35 million for a Saudi investor, fine, sure, have it, because, well, driver salaries are not part of the cost cap, and he'd be a good buddy for Fernando and potentially a successor to yet another world champion. That's good credentials for Russell's own resume. And yes, you heard me right, Russell is in play with Aston should he be the one Verstappen forces out in Toto's desire for glory with Antonelli in tow. To find out why the King's Lane man is being talked about for the Green Team, watch this video next, straight after this one.